India and Indians are the solution to many of the problems. So lucky that we ended up having the ability to go to Kumbh Mela as often as I did. So grateful for every minute that I spent in Prayagraj, every minute I spent traveling to and from Prayagraj, every minute that I spent thinking about it and talking about it. It was just extraordinary. Having come to India, recognizing the importance of India to the 21st century, very quickly discovered a love of Indian philosophy, history, culture, nature. And I realized how little we learn and appreciate about the importance of India in our upbringing. In 1934, 1935, very much pre-independence, was that my godfather, who's an English journalist called Malcolm Muggeridge, and he actually was the assistant editor of the Statesman newspaper.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Statesman Talk with me, Deepthi J. Verma. Today we are being joined by Nick Booker, who's also known as Genius on Instagram. His posts and content have become viral. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Namaskar, Deepthi. Wonderful to be here with you.
I first want to start with your connection with Statesman. I believe there is some connection that goes back to our paper.
I've got several connections with Statesman, but the two most important ones are one that I actually, for a short period, about a year or two, worked in this building.
Really?
So I used to go up to, I can't remember, maybe the 10th floor in 2000, and I think 9, 10, 11,
Wow.
around that period. I was working with universities from around the world that are interested in coming to India to set up campuses, to create collaborations with Indian universities. And I was coming into Statesman House almost every day. So that's a personal connection here, and it's wonderful to be back here in Connaught Place and to be in this amazing building. But my family connection, which I mentioned to you when you called me up, was that my godfather, who's an English journalist called Malcolm Muggeridge, and he actually was the assistant editor of the Statesman newspaper.
When was this?
In 1934, 1935.
Pre-independence.
Very much pre-independence. He was British. He got offered the job in London. He got out on a boat to Bombay, took the train over to Calcutta, lived in the Statesman House building on Chowrengi, and he actually had an apartment on the top of the office building of the Statesman House.
Have you been to Calcutta?
I have, loved Calcutta. And he found it quite tough because the Statesman at that time was a lot of the advertisers were obviously British companies. People like BP, Burma Petroleum, I think it was Burma Petroleum, but BP and Sun Life Insurance, and he mentions them in his diaries. And they were obviously pro the Raj, but my godfather, thankfully, was not. So he believed that India needed to get independence. He supported the freedom movement. His friends were all freedom fighters. And he was very clear that he had a difference of opinion with the proprietors and the advertisers of the Statesman. So he was having to write these editorials, which are all anonymous bylines, obviously. And he was finding it really hard to do what he was told. So he eventually resigned and went back to England and worked for the Evening Standard, and then had an illustrious career. But he kept on coming back to India. So he was actually the British journalist who made a documentary film for the BBC in 1969 on Mother Teresa, bringing Mother Teresa to the world's attention, and also wrote a biography of her, which was published in 1971. I think the Vatican may have even looked at his documentary film and his testimony as evidence for why she was a saint, because he believed that he'd seen a halo behind her, which was caught on film. So there's lots of connections there. He first came out to India, even before the Statesman, to work and to teach actually in Kerala. And the claim to fame that I'm most proud of, apart from the fact he supported the independence movement, was that in 1935, when he moved from Calcutta to Shimla to cover the government, obviously British Raj in those days would transfer power temporarily from Delhi to Shimla, And he went to live in Shimla, and for a period of, I think, 3 or 4 months, he had a very passionate affair with Amrita Shergill.
Wow.
So this founder, India's most celebrated modern artist, Amrita Shergill.
Is this documented as well?
Of course.
Somewhere, yeah.
She wrote about it, he wrote about it, and there's a portrait by Amrita Shergill of my godfather in the National Gallery of Modern Art here in Delhi by
So your
India Gate.
connection is almost 100 years old to India.
Oh, it goes back even 18th century, hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I think if you grew up in the UK, it's very hard for you not to find connections with India if you look. And what's sad about modern Britain is how little British people recognize and acknowledge the importance of India to our past. There is no doubt that many of the benefits that we have in as being British in the 21st century are because of the relationship that Britain had with India, which was one initially of trade and then, of course, of exploitation, that stretched back hundreds of years. And one of the things I wish we had more of is education of young British people at school, at university, and even just in general life, of the importance of India to Britain.
The influence of India.
Yeah. So if you go back through your families, whether you be working class or whether you be upper class or a professional class, whatever it is, I guarantee you there'll be a connection with India. So it could be, for example, that you had a young relative who came out to work for the East India Company a few hundred years ago, and that would have been people coming as soldiers joining the East India Company army, or it could have been obviously traders, merchants, and so on. Or you could get people that were coming out as teachers or as missionaries or as administrators. But even if you didn't have a relative that came to India, you may have had someone who came out of an agricultural background, a farming background, to work in textile mills, which were using Indian cotton and creating textiles which were competing with Indian products in the Indian market and being exported to India. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the municipal services, the roads, the Victorian hospitals, the libraries, let alone the museums and the artifacts you find in them. Wherever you go in Britain, you have connections with India, and every family, either directly or indirectly, has in some way benefited from a relationship with India, maybe in the past or even in the present.
Where did your journey with India start? How did you come here? Tell us, take us through that.
So having just said what I've said, I had no idea of these connections with India in my personal life. So I'm 25, 26 years old. I'm working in London, in Mayfair. I'm sitting in Berkeley Square, and I'm asking myself the question, where in the world is going to be the most important in 2050? Okay, so I'm going to be 17, 2050. I might say 2047 Viksit Bharat now, but in those 100 years after independence. But at that time, I was thinking from my perspective, 2050, China, Silicon Valley, anywhere but Europe was my premise.
Even Africa, a lot of people say.
Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Turkey. I mean, I had a completely open mind. 6 months, desktop research, reading books, reading articles, asking people questions. Where would be the most important? And on almost every criteria, India came out number one. So demographics, scale, diversity, rule of law, free speech, institutions, English language, love of technology, talent, drive, creativity, innovation. So for all of those reasons, I was like, we are living in the Indian century. And if that's true, I want to learn more about India. And when I came out to India, I spent maybe 6 to 8 weeks on my first trip. I then came back to England.
You came as a tourist?
I came looking to understand India, to help Indians who lived in the UK invest in India. So that was my premise was, if I go out to India, I can understand, make some connections and help Indians, Gujaratis, Punjabis mostly, work out what they should do when they wanted to invest in India. So I was helping NRIs and PIOs mostly invest in India. And I did that for a couple of years. Now, what was interesting is that when I came back from my first trip, I suddenly realized maybe I have a connection with India, or why don't I know more about India? Why don't I know more about the British in India? Why don't I know more about the empire, about the Raj, about the independence movement? And all of those questions started to sort of flood into my mind. And I realized how little we learn and appreciate about the importance of India in our upbringing. And it was only then that I discovered things like my grandmother was born in India. And I mean, I hadn't thought of it. There's a watercolor of of Nainital, of the lake from Malital, above my parents' bed. And that is a family heirloom painted by my great grandmother. So there were all of these connections with India that I wasn't even aware of.
You also obviously recognize that it's also it does come with a history of exploitation as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that wasn't lost on you while you were thinking about this connection.
Yes. So then you have this sort of moment of panic. Oh gosh, what did my
Yeah,
relatives do?
exactly, yeah.
Were they awful, or were they slightly more sympathetic to the Indian people? My grandmother was born here, so she's a blameless child. But her parents were living in Calcutta. Then they were sent to Nainital, where she was born. He was the director of industry, and he was a friend of Rabindranath Tagore. Seemed like he was sympathetic, and we have signed Gitanjali. Seems like he was very much connected with Tagore and supportive of the independence movement in the 1910s. So this is he was there sort of 1910, 11 till 1930, living in Calcutta, apart from this period in Nainital. And it was pretty clear from some of the work that he did that he was very much interested in skills development, education, exactly the kind of thing that you would expect the Ministry of Educational Skills Development, or formerly HRD, to be writing now. Yeah. So he was writing these papers of Indians need to develop the skills, we need colleges, we need to improve manufacturing. So it seemed like he was pretty sympathetic to the political cause, but also what could be done to accelerate the economic development of Bengal in that period. And then other relatives seem to be mostly kind of academic.
So you're talking about moving to India that time for investment.
Yeah.
What year was this again?
2000. This was 2007, 2006.
And you haven't left since then?
No, one-way ticket.
Yeah. So then what happened? Take us through that. Like, how did you meet your wife, your home here, your family?
So having come to India, recognizing the importance of India to the 21st century, I then very quickly discovered a love of Indian philosophy, history, culture, nature, and I really wanted to learn more about that. So I started to gradually sort of transition away from this kind of boring...
The finance world.
The finance world, exactly, investment, real estate, that kind of world, to education. And what took me to this building, Statesman House, was the idea that we Brits, foreigners, Westerners, but increasingly, I believe, Indians too, which is something that maybe I only realized 10 years after I went on this journey, need to learn more about, with, from, in, and for India.
Wow.
Okay? So what do I mean by that? We don't know enough about India. I don't think Indians know enough about India. And and having been here for this long, I'm happy to say
India
that.
enough now.
Yeah. I have many Indian friends who live in Delhi who know London and New York and Dubai better than they know.
They're westernized in their thought process and their knowledge.
Yeah. So they know those cities. They know London better than they know
Delhi, maybe.
Bombay or Ahmedabad, or probably maybe even actually parts of this city. So there's an extraordinary aspect of the life of many Indians where they, particularly elite, rich Indians, where they have obviously a very privileged life. Obviously, they know their city, they know their business, they know their family, they know their customs, they know their rituals, they know Bhagavad Gita, Hanuman Chalisa. So they know something of their culture absolutely, through their bones. Like it's absolutely who they are. It's their identity. But when they are thinking about Tamil or Bengali culture, or when they're thinking about Madhya Pradesh, or they're
clueless.
It's a step removed beyond understanding British or American sitcoms and culture and politics and history, and that's extraordinary.
Yeah,
And that's something that I think we all need to work on. So as an outsider, everything was new to me. Everything is interesting. All of India is fascinating. So that's what I kind of...
So you started unraveling it bit by bit because of your own interest. And when did this content start? When did you think of actually making content around it?
So that was accidental. Having realized that we all need to learn more about, from, within, and for India, I then started to help foreign universities, do collaborations with India, not to recruit students. So that was always been very important for me. It's not about Indians going abroad to study. It's about what those universities can do to learn about India, from India, with India. Okay, oh, wow. So it's about research. It's about teaching in India, lower cost of education, understanding Indian culture, history, philosophy, science, technology, research. I mean, nowadays it would be things like Digital India, UPI, ONDC, the tech stack, understanding how India works, and being able to help build for India, and also benefit from learning about Indian culture, philosophy, history, architecture, you name it. So I started doing that, and we started bringing students from abroad to India. So we run short programs of anything from 1 to 6 weeks, enabling foreign students to learn about Indian culture and history and technology and business. So we take them to startups, Zomato's, Oyo's. We take them to Emphasis. We take them to Google. They go to NGOs like Jaipur Foot, Akshaya Patra. They visit mandirs, temples, gurdwaras. They understand, masjids, durgas. They experience the religious, spiritual, economic, political,
and
cultural, historical, everything. And then I started making little videos about what I have
the exchange that was happening.
Yeah. And then it turns out that many Indians are interested in learning about that from my perspective, as well as the foreigners. So that's been a great blessing and privilege.
So India is home now.
Yeah.
Your coverage of the Kumbh Mela was amazing, and you went for all the Shahi Snans, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, no, I not Basant Panchami. So
So you went for the really cold ones.
I did, yes. So Posh Purnima, Makar Sankranti.
And you took the train.
Took the train every time. I did 3 trips, so 6 return.
How was that experience? Has it changed you? We were talking to somebody who's of a spiritual lineage, and he talked about how the Kumbh Mela changes you on a cellular level. Did it change something in you? Did you feel more connected to India after the experience?
I'm so grateful for every minute that I spent in Prayagraj, every minute I spent traveling to and from Prayagraj, every minute that I spent thinking about it and talking about it. It was just an extraordinary time, and we normally have a program that runs in January or February, and we didn't do it this year, and
the student program.
Student program, and we would never have taken the students to Prayagraj because without being there for the initially to understand it and so on. It would have been a question of one or the other, and I was so, in hindsight, I'm so lucky that we ended up having the ability to go to Kumbh Mela as often as I did, and be able to really commit the beginning of this year to attending, thinking, studying, reading, talking about Kumbh, because it's been, I think more than anything, it's been validating of everything that I've always suspected and intuited about the importance and the wonder and potential of India and Indian people.
You mean even on the event scale?
Yes. Nobody on earth could have organized Kumbh Mela. If you think that there's two ends of a spectrum of order, complete order, authoritarian order, and then complete chaos. Kumbh Mela is in the middle. Okay, so there is enough order in order to have the trains arriving, the barricades, the people coming through into the streets and the traffic and adapting, and the boats and the Kumbh Nagar being built, and the tents and the sanitation and the water. Incredible order and organization, but adaptable and flexible enough that it can accommodate millions and millions of people, everyone from billionaires to the poorest people you can imagine, all being able to be in the same space at the same time. Now, I don't think you could have I can't think of another society, Western, Eastern, North, global South, whatever, past, present, that could do that other than present day India. And if you think back, going back into, the earlier parts of the 20th century, so there'd been, obviously, Kumbh happens Maha Kumbh is every 12 years. And then obviously the British were involved, East India Company were involved in Kumbhs, Mughals were involved in Kumbh. So these Magh Melas have been going on in Prayagraj at the Sangam going back for thousands of years. And we know that historically it's documented. None of them have been on this scale. And I don't think any of the previous kind of administrations or governments or ruling authorities would have been able to create what was created this time. It just took the whole thing to another level. Now, within that, there was obviously the tragedy of the fact that people died in stampedes. So awful, tragic accidents and lives lost. And that brings home...
You were there that day?
Yes, we were there that day. And that brings home... And also, I was in the crowds and, on the same location in the previous Shahi Snan. And so, you could imagine exactly the kind of circumstances of what happened. Any time when you're in a large crowd, whether it be in a underground station in rush hour in London, or whether it be in a football stadium or a cinema, or a carnival, it can happen. When you're in a crowd, things, all bets are off. If something goes wrong, or if the whole situation can change in an instant. And obviously I was fortunate, as were tens, if not hundreds of millions of other people who were in crowds during Kumbh, that it didn't happen. At that moment it did. And just the fact that people had made the sacrifice, time, money, to be there, to perform these rituals that obviously meant so much to them, and then to lose their lives is awful. And the atmosphere that morning was very different. It was very solemn. Because it was quite, actually, to be honest with you, it was quite confusing, because on the one hand there was the joy of being at the Sangam, the Triveni Sangam, on the Shahi Snan, on Mauni Amavasya, the most auspicious and important of all of the snans. So there was all of that tension, atmosphere, that build-up. And then there was the word coming through, because we didn't really know the details in the morning of what had happened. We literally, it was just rumors that were going around. So on the one hand, you were, we're here and we're lucky and we're grateful. And then on the other hand, there are people who aren't here, who wanted to be here. And sadly, tragically, they're not. So it was very powerful. And that just brought home the complexity, the challenge of organizing. But again, if you look at that spectrum of complete order, you would never have been able to have so many people visit. It would have become more exclusive. It would have become ticketed or wristbands, or it wouldn't have been inclusive. It would have become an exclusive event. And if you had complete chaos, then it just wouldn't have been possible. So that somehow there is this balance.
Yeah, it's a magical combination that happened. You obviously talk a lot about Indian civilization and Indian rituals. As you were saying, there's sometimes that are there certain things that surprise you still as you keep unraveling different,
Of course.
What's been the most recent ones that you are completely...
the most recent one that I can think of, during Navratri, I read the Devi Mahatmya more carefully, and started to think about it in more detail. So that was very exciting for me, because I suddenly... It's funny, because as you get older, you can return to a Bhagavad Gita, or you can return to the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus. So, you can go to these core texts that have inspired millions, if not billions of people. And they can mean things you can understand them or interpret them, and they can mean more to you differently at different stages of your life. Now, of course, I've become immersed myself in Indian civilization, Dharmic civilization, and trying to understand more of the texts and the inspiration and that they can provide. And the Devi Mahatmya, I had kind of, I don't know why, but I'd always enjoyed the ideas of these grand stories of Devi overcoming demons or the Asuras and Mahayasura. And I've seen the extraordinary depictions in sculpture and murtis of whether it be Durga or Kali or of Mahayasura and so on. So I've experienced that, but I'd never really thought about it on the psychological level. In terms of the complex, so there's a simple thing of like good and evil, or selfish and ego, and you know, what it takes to overcome that. But the layers in the Devi Mahatmya, there are so many different kinds of ego that need to be overcome, in terms of Shumba and Nishumba, in terms of Mahasura, in terms of the generals, in terms of Ketava and Madhu at the beginning. So there's all of these different kind of Asuric forces. And then there's the different manifestations of the divine that are required to overcome them. Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. You know, sometimes you just need to pull yourself together.
The aggressive forms, the Saumya forms. And the
sometimes you
forms,
need aggressive, sometimes you need to be taking a step back. So all of that is genius. I mean, pure genius. And it helps you understand obviously yourself, which is the whole point, and your own psychology.
So the more you're learning, the more you want to learn?
Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, absolutely. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know things. The more you learn, the more you realize you need to learn more. You need to talk to people more. You need to think things through. You need to ask people. You need to experience.
You've also found a very brilliant way of packaging, you know, what you're telling people.
That's very kind of you.
Because I saw some posts, like some event that you were, you know, at the Japanese embassy, where you're talking about sake and dal makhni. So you have found a way to communicate to the younger Indians things that will relate, like, you know, they'll relate to instantly, you know. So is that intentional, or you think that that's what comes to you? Like there's a seriousness to what you're learning, but there's also a lightness in your communication.
That's very kind of you. I guess I've always been trying to communicate to our undergraduate students who are foreigners, and trying to get their attention as quickly as possible in why this aspect of India, or something that's is important for them to appreciate. And that often means, particularly with the foreign students, finding some kind of juxtaposition or some comparison or some analogy. So taking something that they already know and then showing how India is connected to it, or that they can look at it in a different way. And I've tried to now carry on doing that. But with an increasingly Indian audience, I'm obviously talking to people who already know more than I know, or they know certainly the things that I'm talking about to some degree. And therefore, what I have to do is try and find a way that I'm able to confirm the fact that I know what they know, and therefore that people can hopefully understand that you know, I can be trusted, and then add something that they perhaps don't know, that because of the time I've been fortunate to be able to put into the research or the thinking over the years, or make some connection that they perhaps haven't made before. So that's been the kind of the fun, is trying to work out how to do that in 60 seconds.
And your personal journey of, you know, your love affair with India and the Sanatan Dharma or Hindu religion, how deep are you taking that forward? Are you visiting more temples? They're planning on
and I always have done.
I think with you did something around. You took a group to Maganga, if I'm not mistaken, some rising.
Yes.
So is that getting deeper as well?
Yes.
Is that only on a purely curiosity basis, or your connection is also getting deeper?
Oh no, okay. So I'm going to go where you're leading me, but aren't quite taking me. I would love to receive darshan of Jagannath-ji. Okay?
Yeah.
And if I go to Puri, as I've been, I'm not allowed to enter because I'm not Hindu.
Okay.
So in the eyes of the authorities and their definition, I am not Hindu. And I can't be Hindu. Interestingly, if I was a woman, apparently I could.
Because you can marry?
They said I couldn't. If I was a woman and I married a Hindu,
Yeah.
I mean, I got taken to the police station in Puri, yes, because I wanted to.
But that's not the case with the other temples, or everywhere.
No, I've been to. It's very exceptional.
Yeah.
But what I mean is that there is always going to be some
barrier.
a kind of definition of Hindu which is associated with ancestry, or in the case of the conversation I had in Puri, was to do with the fact that I was a man married to a Hindu woman. Whereas if I was a
Hindu woman married to
if I was a woman married to a Hindu man, then I could.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
so you
most
can marry
people disagree
into
with that.
Hinduism or be born into it.
That's what this particular official was suggesting. Now, I'm not sure I agree with any of this, but that's not. I mean, that's for me to say personally. It's not obviously what it's up to anyone to say what they think. I personally feel like at the core of our humanity is a consciousness which is the same.
Yeah.
And although my body may be British and we may be separate in our physical identity, in our life history, our trajectory, our family, our education, everything, at our core we are the same. And that's why the Devi Mahatmyam, or why the Bhagavad Gita, speak to all of us as humans, because they are talking to truths which are universal to the human condition and what it is to be human. So for me, the great journey of discovery in India is a language, particularly when you're using Sanskrit concepts, which you can then, obviously, it's hard to translate, but you can, if you keep thinking about them, you can eventually get to some sense of what they might mean. And a set of architecture, murtis, of art, of dance, of ways of being human, which is showing me aspects of my own humanity, which is universal. And for that, I've actually very interested. So we always do havans at home. My wife, we should mention the fact that my wife is Hindu and Sikh. So her mother was Sikh, her father was Hindu. We had unencouraged we had a Pharaohs. So I've been married in Sikh tradition and Hindu tradition. We also had a wedding in England. So we had a Christian wedding. We also had a court wedding, because I'm a foreigner in India, so you have to have a court wedding. So I've been married in 4 different ways. Each of them, I think, speak to an aspect of my identity, either original or adopted, and certainly journey. And I think that whether it's the rituals of Havan, which we do at home regularly, whether it's whether it's visiting a temple, mandir, whether it's going to the Gurdwara, whether it's going to Tirth, whether it's Maha Kumbh Mela, whether it's reading scripture, whether it's listening kirtan, all of these, fasting, all of these are certainly practices that I do and ways that I think. So
you've obviously talked about how you find some Indians completely maybe not not that aware of their heritage and culture. At the same time, when you visit all these places, when you visit the temples and when you go to the other towns of India, have you also seen a kind of a resurgence for Hindu faith?
Yes, I think that's definitely true. I think it's hard. I've only been in India for 18 years, so I don't have, I can't compare it to beyond that. But I think that there does seem to be an increased interest, whether it be in young people or elderly, in understanding more about Hindu philosophy, religion, mythology, stories, history, itihas. I mean, I'm using all the different words here, but there is definitely an interest in engaging, and I think that in terms of things like Maha Kumbh Mela and things, obviously we saw huge engagement from all sectors of society.
Yeah, so coming back to your reimagining India study tour that you were doing, and I saw the most recent one that you did. You have said somewhere that how India is going to be an island of calm in chaos. So I'm going to end with that note and you said in the next 10 years, that's how you imagine India to be.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
We are living in a period of unbelievable change. So if you think of what is going on in terms of technology, AI, robotics, healthcare, software, eating up the world, to use Silicon Valley's kind of phrasing, India's part of that. So Indians are leading many Silicon Valley companies. They're making up the workforce. They have companies here, Indian startups, Indian technology companies. So India's right at the heart of the technological transformation, from the kind of research level, the cutting edge research, to the leadership, to the funding, to the entrepreneurs, to the workforce. So India's part of that. Now, not every country or people are, whether it be it's just that. So India's right at the heart of one of the great revolutions. The other big change that's going on is the shift of economic and geopolitical power to the east. So away from Europe, away from America, towards China, and obviously towards India increasingly as well. So you've got economic growth, geopolitical growth, and I think that China's got a very difficult situation with its demographics, with its political situation, transition from President Xi to the next. We don't know what's going to happen. The Chinese don't know because that's not the nature of the system. So it's hard to predict how China's going to mature over the coming decades. Yeah. America is, everything is up in the air at the moment. And we don't know how that's going to land politically, economically. Same thing you can say, Europe, it seems to be kind of increasingly writing itself out of the human story. And I think India is in a very, very strong position to both use technology to improve and uplift the quality of life for over 1 billion people, to have the economic growth and that will fuel that, and also this civilizational, cultural identity or identities where you have the ability to kind of manage complexity and difference in a way that other countries seem to be struggling with.
Speaking of that, where do you think London is? It was always like the melting pot in the summer. It was the melting pot for so many investments, and now they say British people are leaving. I don't know, high net worth individuals are leaving. What do you think is going wrong there?
I don't think Britain has fully recognized what role Britain and British people can play in the human story in the 21st century. So I think it's trying to hold on to what Britain has rather than trying to be forward-looking. And one of the big truths that I don't think is spoken enough is that India and Indians are the solution to many of the problems. So the obvious.
So many Indians in England.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Look at the National Health Service. Yeah. So the NHS doctors of Indian origin and NHS nurses of Indian origin are absolutely the backbone of the NHS. And in order to improve the healthcare and solve many of the problems with the NHS, more Indians are going to be required. Now, I think that there's a way that you can do that where the Indians don't necessarily all need to leave India in order to perform that role. So telemedicine. I could see a world where you have Indian doctors in India with patients in India, so
enrolled
helping
on their system as well.
but also patients in the UK. And I think that would be fantastic. So rather than Indian doctors, qualifying from medical college in India and then just getting on a plane to the UK or America or Australia or wherever, let's have them stay in India, helping improve the quality of life and the health of Indians, but through telemedicine, being able to reach people overseas, and then the incomes and the money that can flow back from that can enrich the Indian healthcare system. So I think we need some kind of like blue sky thinking on that front. So I'd like to, why can't the NHS help medical education in India and have Indian doctors remain in India but provide telemedicine to patients in the UK? Universities, we need, Indians need more teachers, they need more cutting edge curriculums, they need capacity, they need investment. Why can't we have more universities sharing content, courses, faculty? But the British people should be actually, in terms of the teachers and the faculty, should be coming to India so that they can also learn from, about, with, and in and for India.
So they have to get over their, maybe their arrogance of, having ruled the world at one point, and they have to be willing to embrace the new world.
I don't think the current, of course you'll have a minority who are arrogant, but I think it's more on the side of ignorance than it is arrogance. Yeah. I think for example, people don't think that they would be able to have a quality of life in India, or they don't think India is relevant to them, or they don't know why India's made such an important contribution to the human story and civilization. So it's really a kind of education that needs to be transformed back in the UK. So
what are your future plans? Do you see yourself facilitating any of this, or you want to continue in the educational space?
I hope so. Of course, I would love more people to appreciate the genius of India, whether it be the technology, the innovation, the startups, all the cutting edge stuff that's happening in India right now, or the civilizational lessons, the understanding of human psychology, the art, the beauty, the values, the importance of family, and then of course the natural wonders. India should be the tourism capital of the world. Why do people go to Southeast Asia, Paris, Las Vegas more than they come to India, when India has so much beauty and wonder to offer? And that's a message that needs to reach the right people.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. We hope to see more of you at The Statesman. So that we can talk about more stuff, the things that you're doing, the excursions you're going on, the journeys that you're taking. It'll be so amazing to hear more of that.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and like and share. And all our digital social media channels are listed below. Thank you for watching.